when the U.S. government admitted something wasn't human. July 26, 2023, Washington, District of Columbia. The air inside the Rayburn House office building carried the weight of history about to be made. Outside, the summer heat shimmered off the marble steps where protesters and supporters gathered, holding signs that ranged from "Demand the truth" to "We are not alone." Inside, beneath fluorescent lights and before a packed gallery of journalists, government officials, and citizens who had waited hours for a seat, 3 men prepared to testify before the House Oversight Committee. Among them sat David Charles Grusch, 46 years old, decorated combat officer, Afghanistan veteran, former National Geospatial Intelligence Agency representative to the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, a man who had spent 14 years serving his country in intelligence operations, entrusted with some of the nation's deepest secrets. His military ribbings told a story of service and sacrifice, but on this day, his testimony would tell another story entirely. As Grusch raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, few in that room understood they were about to witness something unprecedented. Not a leak, not a rumor, not a blurry photograph analyzed by internet enthusiasts. This would be sworn testimony, under penalty of perjury, delivered by a man whose credentials were beyond reproach. Representative Nancy Mace leaned into her microphone. Her question was direct, unflinching. Do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials? The room fell silent. Cameras focused. Grusch's answer came without hesitation. Something I can't discuss in a public setting. But what he could discuss was enough to send shockwaves around the world. The United States government, he testified, has been operating a multi-decade clandestine program. A program designed to retrieve craft of non-human origin. A program to reverse engineer technology that defies our understanding of physics. And when pressed about what happened to pilots of these craft, Grusch spoke 2 words that would dominate headlines for weeks to come: non-human biologics. For 76 years, since the summer of 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico, this topic has lived in the shadows, dismissed as fantasy, ridiculed as conspiracy theory, relegated to late-night radio shows and science fiction novels. But in that congressional hearing room, under oath before the American people, the narrative shifted. This was no longer about belief. This was about testimony, evidence, witnesses with top-secret clearances, military pilots with impeccable records, intelligence officers willing to risk their careers, their reputations, their very safety to tell what they know. The question is no longer whether something is happening. The question is what has been hidden from us and why. Stay with us as we unfold this story, piece by piece, testimony by testimony. And when you reach the end, we want to hear from you. What do you think is really going on? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation is just beginning. The whistleblower. David Grusch did not set out to become a whistleblower. He set out to serve his country. Born in Pennsylvania, raised in a family that valued duty and honor, Grusch enlisted in the Air Force and quickly distinguished himself. His intelligence work took him to combat zones. He earned commendations. He gained security clearances that granted him access to information most Americans will never know exists. In 2021, Grusch was assigned to the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, later renamed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. His job was to help the government investigate reports of strange objects in American airspace, objects that pilots couldn't identify, objects that exhibited flight characteristics that seemed to violate the laws of physics as we understand them. But what Grusch discovered went far beyond analyzing reports. Through his work, he gained access to highly classified programs so compartmentalized that even members of Congress with oversight responsibilities had no knowledge of their existence. He interviewed more than 40 witnesses, intelligence officers, military personnel, contractors working on programs buried deep within the defense and aerospace sectors. What they told him was staggering. According to Grusch's testimony, the United States government has been recovering craft of non-human origin for decades. These weren't weather balloons. These weren't experimental drones. These were intact and partially intact vehicles. Some have been found at crash sites. Others have been transferred from foreign governments who had made similar recoveries. Grusch reviewed documentation, He saw photographic evidence. He spoke to individuals who had first-hand knowledge, people who had worked on reverse engineering efforts, attempting to understand technology that was generations, perhaps centuries, beyond our current capabilities. And what disturbed him most was the secrecy, not the kind of secrecy designed to protect national security, the kind of secrecy designed to prevent oversight, to hide from Congress, to operate outside the constitutional framework that governs our democracy. In the spring of 2022, Grusch made a decision. He would file a whistleblower complaint with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. He would report what he had learned to Congress. He would speak publicly, but going public came at a cost. Grusch has spoken about the retaliation he faced, professional repercussions, personal attacks on his character, efforts to discredit him before he could testify. On the morning of his congressional testimony, Grusch arrived at the Rayburn building knowing that his life would never be the same. He wore his military uniform. His bearing was straight, disciplined. When he spoke, his voice was calm, measured, professional. This was not a man seeking attention. This was a man compelled by conscience. Representative Tim Burchett asked him directly, "Do you have any personal knowledge of people who have been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal extraterrestrial technology?" Grusch's answer was unequivocal. Yes. He went further. He stated that he had interviewed individuals who had been part of these programs, who had seen things they were told never to speak about, who had been threatened if they came forward. The implications were staggering. If Grusch's testimony was accurate, it meant that elements within the United States government had been operating beyond the reach of elected officials. It meant that technology with the potential to revolutionize energy, transportation, and our understanding of the universe had been kept hidden. And it meant that we were not alone. But Grusch was careful. He refused to speculate. He stuck to what he knew, what had been told by credible witnesses, what he had seen in classified documents. When asked questions that touched on information he could not discuss publicly, he offered to provide that information in a sensitive compartmented information facility, where members of Congress with appropriate clearances could hear the full story. Sitting there in that hearing room, David Grusch was not just a whistleblower. He was a catalyst. His testimony opened a door that had been locked for generations. And once that door was opened, others began to walk through it. Non-human biologics. The phrase hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Non-human biologics. Representative Mace had asked Grusch if biologics had been recovered along with the craft he had described. His answer was precise. Yes, non-human biologics had been part of some of these recoveries. Let that sink in for a moment. A former intelligence officer, under oath before Congress, testifying that biological material from beings not of this earth had been retrieved by the United States government. Not speculation, not rumor, sworn testimony. Grusch did not elaborate in the public setting. He could not. The details, he explained, touched on classified information that he had already shared with the Inspector General and was prepared to share with members of Congress in a secure environment. But even the admission itself was historic. For decades, researchers, enthusiasts, and whistleblowers had claimed that extraterrestrial bodies had been recovered. The most famous allegation centered on Roswell in 1947, where witnesses claimed they saw not just debris, but occupants of a crashed craft. The official story from the military changed multiple times. First, it was a flying disc. Then it was a weather balloon. Decades later, the explanation shifted to a classified Project Mogul surveillance balloon. Witnesses who claimed to have seen bodies were dismissed. Documents that supported their claims were classified or disappeared. But now, in 2023, a credentialed intelligence officer was saying on the record that such recoveries had happened, not just once, multiple times, and not just in the distant past. These programs, according to Grusch, were ongoing. The congressional representatives pressed for details. What kind of biologics? Where were they now? Who had access to them? Grusch maintained his discipline. He acknowledged the questions, but reiterated that full answers required a classified briefing. What he could say was that the information had been corroborated by multiple witnesses. These were not anonymous sources. These were individuals with direct knowledge, many of whom were willing to testify under oath in a secure setting. Senator Marco Rubio, who serves on the Senate Intelligence Committee, had previously stated in interviews that he had spoken with first-hand witnesses, people who had been part of these programs, people who had seen things that the public had never been told about. Rubio described them as credible, serious individuals who had held positions that gave them access to extraordinary information. The existence of non-human biologics raises questions that extend far beyond government secrecy. If these materials exist, what has been learned from them? Have they been studied? What did the analysis reveal about the physiology of non-human intelligence? Are these beings similar to us or radically different? Do they breathe oxygen? Do they have DNA? Are they biological in the way we understand biology, or are they something else entirely? And perhaps most troubling, if the government has had access to this information for decades, why has it been kept from the scientific community? Imagine what humanity could learn if biologists, geneticists, and medical researchers had the opportunity to study evidence of non-human life. The discoveries could revolutionize our understanding of evolution, the origins of life, and our place in the universe. But instead, according to Grusch and other witnesses, this information has been locked away, controlled by a small group operating in the shadows, programmed so compartmentalized that even presidents may not have been fully briefed. The hearing continued. The questions grew more pointed. Representative Jared Moskowitz asked Grusch if he believed the government was in possession of UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. Grusch confirmed, absolutely. He based this on his conversations with individuals who had direct knowledge, people who had been involved in the recovery and analysis of these craft. Representative Eric Burleson took it further. He asked if Grusch had spoken with anyone who had been inside one of these craft. Grusch's response: he had interviewed people who had entered recovered vehicles of non-human origin. The room erupted in murmurs. Journalists frantically typed notes. This was no longer theoretical. As we move forward in this story, keep this in mind. Every claim, every allegation, every piece of testimony we are discussing came from individuals willing to swear an oath, to face cross-examination, to risk federal prosecution if they lied. These are not internet rumors. These are not tabloid headlines. This is testimony before the United States Congress. So we want to ask you, what do you make of this? Do you believe that non-human biologics have been recovered? Do you think the government has been hiding this from the public for valid national security reasons? Or is something else at play? Pause for a moment and share your thoughts in the comments. We are genuinely curious to hear what you think, because this story affects all of us. The pilots who saw, while David Grusch testified about what he learned through interviews and documentation. Two other men sat at that same table with first-hand experiences that were equally compelling. Commander David Fravor, retired Navy pilot, and Ryan Graves, former Navy fighter pilot. These were not intelligence analysts. These were aviators, men who had spent thousands of hours in the cockpit of the most advanced fighter jets on Earth. Men trained to observe, assess, and react under extreme pressure. Commander Fravor's story begins on November 14, 2004, off the coast of San Diego, California. The USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group was conducting training exercises in the Pacific Ocean. The weather was clear, visibility excellent. Fravor was flying an F/A-18 Super Hornet as part of a routine training mission. Then, something unusual happened. The USS Princeton, an Aegis-class cruiser equipped with some of the most sophisticated radar systems in the world, had been tracking unknown objects for several days. Objects that appeared at 80,000 feet, then dropped to sea level in seconds. Objects that moved in ways that defied aerodynamics. The radar operators could not identify them. They could not explain them. On that November afternoon, Fravor and his wingmen were redirected to investigate one of these objects. As they approached the coordinates, Fravor saw something that would change his life. Hovering above the ocean, just above a disturbance in the water, was an object. It was white, smooth, shaped like a tic-tac mint, about 40 feet long. No wings, no rotors, no visible means of propulsion, no exhaust, no heat signature. Fravor descended to get a closer look. As he did, the object reacted. It mirrored his movements. When he tried to cut it off, it accelerated, not gradually, instantaneously. The object shot away and reappeared 60 miles away in less than a minute. To cover that distance in that time would require speeds and G-forces that would obliterate any known aircraft, and certainly any human pilot inside. Fravor returned to the Nimitz. He filed a report. He told his commanding officers what he had seen. And for nearly 15 years, his account was largely ignored by the public and dismissed by officials. Until 2017, when video footage of the encounter, recorded by another pilot's targeting system, was leaked to the media. The footage showed the object, smooth, fast, inexplicable. The Pentagon eventually confirmed the video was authentic. In his congressional testimony, Fravor described the encounter with the precision of a trained observer. No exaggeration, no embellishment, just the facts. An object that displayed technology far beyond anything in the U.S. military arsenal. And he was not alone in his assessment. Radar operators, weapons systems officers, and other pilots witnessed the same phenomenon. Sitting beside him was Ryan Graves. Graves had his own experiences, but they were different. Not a single dramatic encounter, but repeated, almost daily sightings. From 2014 to 2015, Graves and his squadron, operating out of Naval Air Station Oceana in Virginia, encountered unknown objects in restricted airspace off the East Coast. The objects appeared on radar. They appeared on infrared. Pilots saw them with their own eyes. Graves described them as geometric shapes, dark cubes inside transparent spheres, objects that remained stationary in hurricane-force winds, objects that moved against the wind at speeds that should have torn them apart. What disturbed Graves most was the frequency. These were not rare events. They were happening regularly, sometimes multiple times a day. His squadron began reporting the sightings through official channels. They filed safety reports because these objects pose a collision hazard. Imagine flying a multi-million-dollar fighter jet at hundreds of miles per hour. An unidentified object suddenly appears in your flight path. The potential for catastrophe was real. But despite the reports, despite the evidence, Graves felt that nothing was being done. The sightings were acknowledged, filed away, and largely ignored. Pilots joked about it, because humor was the only way to process something so unsettling. But beneath the jokes was genuine concern. What were these things? Who controlled them? And why were they operating in restricted military airspace? In his testimony, Graves emphasized the national security implications. If these objects were foreign technology, Russian or Chinese drones perhaps, then they represented a significant threat. But the capabilities he described exceeded anything known to exist. The speeds, the maneuvers, the lack of visible propulsion. No nation on Earth had publicly demonstrated such technology. And if they were not foreign adversaries, then what were they? Both Fravor and Graves made clear that they were not speculating about aliens or extraterrestrials. They were simply reporting what they observed. Objects that behave in ways that current science and engineering cannot explain. Objects that official channels seemed unwilling or unable to address. Before we continue, let us pause and acknowledge something important. You have stayed with us this far, and for that, we are genuinely grateful. We know this information is heavy. We know it challenges much of what we have been taught to believe about our world and our place in it. But we promise you, the most compelling parts of this story are still ahead. The next chapters will reveal the programs allegedly hidden for decades, the government's response, and what all of this means for our future. Stay with us. The best is yet to come. The hidden programs. The testimony of pilots like Fravor and Graves established that something unexplained was operating in our skies. But David Grusch's allegations went much deeper. He was not merely claiming that UFOs exist. He was claiming that the United States government has been retrieving these objects, studying them, and attempting to reverse engineer their technology for decades, and that these efforts have been deliberately hidden from congressional oversight. Let's be clear about what that means. Congress is constitutionally empowered to oversee the executive branch, to authorize funding, to ensure that government programs operate within the law. If Grusch's allegations are true, then elements of the military-industrial complex have been operating outside that framework, using misappropriated funds, concealing programs from the very representatives elected to provide oversight. In his testimony, Grusch stated that he had spoken with individuals involved in crash retrieval operations, people who had been tasked with securing sites where non-human craft had come down. Some of these retrievals, according to his sources, occurred in remote locations, deserts, mountains, ocean floors. The operations were swift, classified, and compartmentalized. Even those involved often did not know the full scope of what they were part of. Once retrieved, these craft were allegedly taken to secure facilities. Grusch mentioned that some of the technology was so advanced that reverse engineering efforts had made only limited progress. Imagine trying to understand a smartphone if you lived in the 18th century. You might recognize it as a manufactured object, but the principles behind its operation would be utterly foreign. Yet, according to Grusch, efforts continued. Defense contractors, working under classified agreements, attempted to unlock the secrets of propulsion systems that produced no exhaust, materials that were lighter and stronger than anything in our periodic table, energy sources that seemed to operate without fuel. In June of 2023, a report surfaced that added weight to these claims. It was called the Immaculate Constellation Report. The document, which was delivered to Congress, described a program allegedly designed to detect, track, and analyze UAPs using an array of classified sensors and satellites. According to the report, the program had collected vast amounts of data, high-resolution imagery, radar tracks, signals intelligence. The report alleged that this data was being hidden from official UAP investigation efforts, including the Pentagon's own All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. In other words, even within the government, there were layers of secrecy. Information was compartmentalized to such an extent that the left hand did not know what the right hand was doing. Senator Marco Rubio, in interviews following a congressional hearing, confirmed that he had been approached by multiple individuals who claimed to have first-hand knowledge of these programs. He described them as serious people, credible, not attention seekers or conspiracy theorists, people who had held significant positions in defense and intelligence, and who were willing to testify under oath if granted protection. This is where the story becomes not just about UFOs, but about transparency and accountability. If such programs exist, funded by taxpayer dollars, operating without oversight, then the American people have a right to know, not necessarily every technical detail, not information that would compromise legitimate national security, but the basic truth of what is happening. In the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, Congress included provisions demanding that the Department of Defense and intelligence agencies provide records related to technologies of unknown origin and non-human intelligence. The language was explicit. This was not a polite request. It was a mandate backed by law. And yet, even with that mandate, progress has been slow. Agencies have pushed back, citing classification, citing the need to protect sources and methods. Some officials have claimed that the programs Grusch described simply do not exist. Others have remained silent. But Grusch's testimony included another troubling allegation. He claimed that people had been hurt, that individuals who got too close to these programs, who asked too many questions, had faced retaliation. Some had been threatened. Some had their careers destroyed. And in his words, some had been physically harmed. When Representative Tim Burch had asked if he had evidence of people being harmed in efforts to conceal this information, Grusch answered yes. He did not provide names in the public hearing. He could not. But he made clear that he had spoken to individuals who had experienced retaliation, and he had provided that information to the Inspector General. This raises deeply unsettling questions. If a shadow apparatus exists within the government, willing to harm its own people to protect these secrets, then what does that say about the state of our democracy? What does it say about the balance of power? There is another dimension to this story. If the United States has been recovering and studying non-human technology, is it the only country doing so? Grusch mentioned that some retrieved craft had come from foreign governments, nations that had made their own recoveries and shared information through intelligence channels. If this is a global phenomenon, then the implications extend beyond American politics. This becomes a question for all of humanity. What do these visitors want? Why are they here? Are they observing us? Studying us? And if they possess technology so far beyond ours, what does that mean for our security, our sovereignty, our future? The truth emerges. The Pentagon did not remain silent in the face of these allegations. In the days following the congressional hearing, the Department of Defense issued statements. Spokespersons addressed the media. The official position was clear and firm. The Department of Defense has found no verifiable evidence that any UAP sighting represented extraterrestrial technology. No credible evidence of extraterrestrial activity or off-world technology. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, director of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office at the time, testified separately before Congress. He presented data from the office's investigations. As of their most recent report, they had examined 1,652 UAP cases. The majority had mundane explanations: drones, balloons, birds, optical illusions caused by atmospheric conditions or sensor artifacts. But a subset of cases remained unexplained, objects that displayed flight characteristics that current science could not account for, objects that multiple sensors detected simultaneously, objects that trained observers, pilots with thousands of hours of experience, could not identify. Kirkpatrick emphasized that unexplained does not mean extraterrestrial. It simply means that with the data available, a definitive explanation could not be determined. He called for more rigorous scientific investigation, better sensors, more comprehensive data collection, a systematic approach that would either identify these objects or confirm that they represent something truly anomalous. Yet, Kirkpatrick also acknowledged something significant. Some UAP cases involved objects that appeared to demonstrate advanced technology that, if real, would represent a serious intelligence and security concern. Whether that technology was foreign or something else, it demanded investigation. The tension between Grusch's allegations and the Pentagon's denials created a divide. Some members of Congress believed Grusch. They found his testimony credible, corroborated by other witnesses, and consistent with information they had received from additional sources. Other members remained skeptical. They wanted hard evidence, physical proof, not testimony, no matter how credible, but artifacts, technology, something tangible. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez asked a pointed question during the hearing. If these programs exist, if craft have been recovered, where is the funding coming from? If it is not in the official budget, then where are the resources being diverted from? This is not just about UFOs. This is about fiscal accountability. Billions of dollars potentially being spent on programs that Congress has no visibility into. Representative Anna Paulina Luna raised another concern. If our government possesses advanced technology recovered from non-human sources, and if that technology could revolutionize energy or transportation, why is it being kept secret? Imagine clean, limitless energy. Imagine propulsion systems that could make space travel routine. The benefits to humanity would be incalculable. But if such technology exists, and if it is being withheld, then why? Some have speculated that it is about control, that revealing such technology would disrupt existing power structures, oil industries, aerospace industries, geopolitical balances of power. Others believe it is about fear that humanity is not ready. That disclosure would cause panic, social upheaval, or a crisis of faith. Grusch himself did not claim to have all the answers. He testified about what he had learned, what he had been told by credible witnesses, and what documentation he had reviewed. He acknowledged that some of his information was secondhand, but he also emphasized that it provided all of this information, including names of witnesses and access to classified materials, to the Inspector General. And the Inspector General found the complaint credible and urgent. In the months following the hearing, additional witnesses have come forward, some publicly, some through secure channels to congressional committees. A former Canadian official testified that his government had also encountered UAPs and had shared information with the United States. Pilots from other countries have given similar accounts of unexplained encounters. The momentum for disclosure is building. In 2024, the National Defense Authorization Act included not just demands for records, but protection for whistleblowers. Individuals who come forward with information about these programs are now legally shielded from retaliation. This has emboldened more people to speak. There have also been reports of individuals who claim to have been physically affected by close encounters with UAPs. Burns, radiation exposure, neurological effects. The Pentagon has acknowledged investigating some of these claims, though details remain classified. What is becoming increasingly clear is that this issue is not going away. For decades, it was easy to dismiss, to ridicule, to ignore, but the testimony before Congress, the involvement of credible witnesses, the demands from elected representatives, and the growing body of evidence have shifted the conversation. This is now a matter of public record, a matter of ongoing investigation, and perhaps most importantly, it is a matter that affects every person on this planet. If we are not alone, if intelligence is from elsewhere visiting Earth, if technology exists that could transform our civilization, then we all deserve to know, not because it is sensational, not because it is exciting, but because it is the truth. And in a democracy, the people have a right to the truth. The journey from ridicule to congressional hearings has been long. Researchers and witnesses who spent decades being dismissed are now being taken seriously. Pilots who filed reports that were ignored are now being heard. Intelligence officers who risked their careers are now being protected. But the ultimate question remains unanswered. What is the truth? Are we alone? Have we been visited? Does our government possess technology that could change the world? David Grusch believes the answer is yes. Fravor and Graves witnessed things they cannot explain. Dozens of other credible witnesses have come forward with similar accounts. The evidence is mounting. The pressure for disclosure is growing, and the world is watching. So here we are, July 26, 2023, may well be remembered as a turning point in human history. The day when the United States Congress heard sworn testimony that we are not alone, that our government has known for decades, that technology beyond our understanding has been retrieved, studied, and hidden. Whether you believe every word of that testimony or approach it with skepticism, one thing is undeniable. Serious people with serious credentials are saying serious things, under oath, with legal consequences if they lie. This is not a fringe movement anymore. This is happening in the halls of Congress, in the highest levels of government. And the implications, if true, are staggering. But this is not just our story to tell. This is your story too. You are part of this moment. So we want to hear from you. Do you believe the testimony of David Grusch, Commander Fravor, and Ryan Graves? Do you think the government has been hiding the truth about non-human intelligence? And if so, what should happen next? Should there be full disclosure? Should the technology, if it exists, be shared with the world? Or are there legitimate reasons to keep it secret? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and your perspective matters. This conversation is bigger than any one video, any one channel, any one government. This is about humanity's place in the universe. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it raised questions you had never considered before, then please subscribe to this channel. We are committed to bringing you in-depth investigations, credible analysis, and the stories that matter most. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and make sure you do not miss what comes next, because this story is far from over. New witnesses are coming forward. New evidence is emerging. Congress is continuing its investigations, and we will be here to bring you every development. Before you go, click on the next recommended video. We have more in-depth coverage, more witness testimony, and more analysis of what this all means. The journey into the unknown continues, and we want you with us every step of the way. Thank you for watching. Thank you for thinking. And thank you for being part of this extraordinary moment in history.